Hello, guys, and welcome. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by Calgary Shamanic Services, traditional healing and empowerment for the modern world. Calgary Shamanic Services offers a full range of shamanic healing, services, training, workshops. Wade's practice is grounded in strong spiritual ethics, and he is committed to healing you and transforming his clients. This guy is in the business of making people better. That's what he does. He takes your problems, he helps you fix them, he sends you on your way a better person than you came to him. Believe me, I use Wade all the time. He's amazing. If you don't use a shaman now, give it a try. It's awesome. No issue is too big or too small. All that is required is the intention to overcome what ails you, and Wade can point you in the right direction. Visit Wade at calgaryshaman.com and contact Wade for all your needs with shamanic services. Check in there whenever you get a chance. He has drum circles coming up. He has trainings coming up. He has workshops coming up. Check that out when you get an opportunity. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Obsessed Marketing and Sales Solutions. At Obsessed, we specifically deal with natural, holistic, and spiritual-based businesses, and we help them to grow and get themselves and their products and their services out into the world. Sometimes people that are based in a spiritual practice, in a holistic practice, they have a really hard time feeling like they're getting their name out there, feeling like they're getting their products out there, and they really don't know how they should go about it. We specialize in helping you get these things out into the world so you have the opportunity to change the world the way that you know you can. You are not going to change the world if you sit at home and don't try all you can to get your products and your services out there. The only way you're going to heal more people, the only way that you're going to bring more light to the world is to get yourself out there and make a difference. So if you guys have a natural, a holistic, a spiritual, any sort of business that's based like that, please give us a call. We can help you with anything and everything you're doing. We can help you get products out. We can help you get your service out. We can help you with your website. We can help you with your social media. The bottom line is we are fantastic at getting you results and getting you in front of the people who are looking for the products and services that you are selling. My guest today on the podcast is my third installment of my conversation with Shaman Wade. We picked up today's conversation where we left off with the second one. And in today's podcast, we spoke quite a bit about some of the ins and outs of the more basic questions of shamanism. And, Wade never ceases to amaze me. I learned just as much in this one as I have in any one with Wade. I love speaking to this guy. I love hearing what he has to say. I leave all of my conversations with Wade a different person. I leave with something more than I came with. And I'm so grateful I have a guy like this in my life that helps me along my path. So, without further ado, here's the third installment of my conversation with Shaman Wade. Enjoy. We as seekers are all searching for that divine experience with our God. Listen in as we discuss different people's stories and perspectives about God from their walk of life and from their part of the world. My name is Matt Muldoon, and this is the Obsessed with God podcast. Okay, Wade, we're live again.
Awesome.
How are you?
Great. Yeah, I can't complain. My team pulled off a victory last night, so there's hope. Glimmer of hope. Maybe we won't call it hope yet, but
Before we started this podcast, Wade's a big Montreal Canadiens fan, and we were talking about that. And if you follow hockey, you know how do or die their team is right now. And Wade's, I'm sure, sitting at home stressed out on the couch, hoping that they pull it out.
Yeah, down 3-0 now, 3-1. So we'll see. Win the next one, anything's possible. So I have hope.
That's right. So again, before the podcast, I was mentioning to you, Wade, after the last conversation we had, I've had a bunch of different people ask me sort of more basic questions about shamanism. And the one question that kept coming up with people was that the things that you were speaking about, it's easy for people to comprehend, and they understand the sort of the beauty and the spirituality that you're talking about. So why is it, or where did it originate, that shamanism has such an undertow of negativity to it? Like, why is it considered to be, devil worship, or why is it considered to be just negative in general? And I had this conversation with one of my family members about, they said to me, like, they're not interested in shamanism because they feel like if you're communicating with spirits, you're doing something that's either reserved for the dead or reserved for sages, and it's not something you should be participating in. Like, where did all this come from that people are so scared of it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. There's obviously religious aspects to it. Like for myself personally, I was always into like a sophisticated spirituality and an intelligent spirituality. I had a very academic background, and I like to read the scholars and all the geniuses, who could talk about spirituality. And when you look at shamanism, it looks very archaic, looks very primitive. People dressing up, doing these things, doing these ceremonies and rituals. And I really wanted nothing to do with it. I'll be honest with you. I took one look at that and said, that's not for me. It took me reading a lot of academic books and firsthand accounts just about the healing power of it, to really start to think, well, maybe there is something here. I have a psychology undergrad, so I appreciate psychology. And it just made me think, well, this has been around for too long. It's worked for too long. People are having remarkable healings. So there's got to be something going on here. So then, after my mind was convinced that there's got to be something here, I started to delve into it very slowly, like tiptoeing into the water, reading more about shamanism, taking workshops, and just generally wading into it until I could, through my personal experience, there was no doubt within me that this is real and this can help transform people's lives. But I didn't go in as a believer. I went in with trepidation. I went in with doubt. I went in reluctantly, to be honest with you, which is kind of where my life was pushing me. And I kind of followed the currents of that. In terms of religion, like I mentioned, I didn't grow up religious. I do appreciate religion. I think it's all beautiful. If it's practiced in its essence, to invite all people, all cultures, within it, and have union with God ultimately. But I think some texts, I think, refer to it as devil worshipping potentially, and I'm not sure. I've never read that, so I don't know. I've heard that in passing. I do know there's an issue with the notion of spirits. Well, if you're a Christian, an angel would be a spirit. So from a shamanic perspective, we work only with compassionate spirits, or spirit helpers, we say. So that there's a whole mixed sort of spirits that are out there potentially, and we're rubbing up against them regardless if you want to or not. They're part of existence. They're part of our reality. Some people can perceive them. Some people cannot. We all have the ability to potentially, but until you experience them, you're not going to believe that they're true. It's like anything in life, and you shouldn't. And this is where we get into danger with anything, with religion or even philosophy or anything, when we rely on belief rather than experience. So for anyone who doesn't believe, that's great, But don't. What's the word? You need to. Don't be naive, or don't put the blinders on and be overly biased where you're closing yourself to certain experiences. So it's not for everyone, that's for sure. For me, it was always about the therapeutic healing qualities. And as a spiritual practitioner, just wanting to spiritually transform myself and running into blocks and not being able to get over those blocks, I found a system in shamanism to help me heal those wounds, to transform, to actually grow spiritually where those blocks were. So that's kind of how I got involved and how I've stayed with it. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question or not.
Yeah, no, it does. And I'm wondering now is as a shaman, do you have to convince people that it's okay when they're contacting you, or by the time they've contacted you, they're fine with it? Or are you having to sort of sit with them and reassure that, like, look, this will be okay. What's going to happen to you is okay, and your experience will be okay? Or do you find that most people they're not necessarily indentured to it, but they're open to it, by the time they speak to you?
Yeah, I'd say most people are open to it. Some people have a good understanding of it. Some people have no understanding. They were told they need to see a shaman for their problem, and they call me, right? Some people, if you tell them you work with compassionate spirit helpers, they hang up the phone, right? But I'm very ethical. I don't want no surprises. I always communicate what they're getting into. So there's informed consent before they even come to the meeting. They know that I'm working with compassionate spirits. They know that I'm working on the spiritual issue of their problem primarily. And that's the focus. So there's nothing to be. You kind of come in with your eyes open, so you know what you're getting into. So there's a whole gamut of people that run into it, but I'd say generally, if someone's going to contact me, they have a general sense of what they're getting into. Now, the Google and internet, you can just Google shamanism and you have something pop up, or say it into your phone and it tells it back to you what it is. So we live in an instantaneous world, so people have a general sense of what it is. Now, do people know what that entails and what that's going to encompass and what type of experiences they're going to have? Generally not. Or people come in with high expectations and have to temper that. They think that they've heard their friend had a life-changing experience, they read a book about it and people had their lives transformed, and they expect that. Well, that's often a block in the process, and you have to kind of temper that and put people in the right state of consciousness to receive spiritual healing.
When you started shamanism as an educated person, was it difficult for you when most educational systems are based on if this then that, like there's proof to what's happening? Like if you're a psychologist, you read about a psychological system, you implement it, and then you see results from that person. Was it difficult for you in shamanism to practice it and then to have proof that was exclusive to you? The proof wasn't for anyone else, it was just for you in your life. And the reason I asked that is because that was a real hurdle for me because the first experience I had was ayahuasca. And so when I tried shamanism, it was real to me immediately because I ended up in the same place I went to with ayahuasca. So there was no question to me. Yeah. But some people that I speak to have said like it took them a while to accept it. Did it take you a while to accept what was happening, or right off the hop were you like, wow, this is for Wade?
Yeah, I mean, not much happened to me for a long time. And it's funny because we all perceive spiritually differently, and that's an interesting notion. People think, oh, he's spiritual and I'm not, or they're spiritual and I'm not. But you never know. So I got a new phone yesterday. I don't know. They might get a few buzzes. I'm talking to a new flashy phone. I like my old. I'm having like cell phone. What do you call it? Remorse. I miss my old cell phone. Felt so good in my hands.
Yeah,
I knew how it worked. Now I got this big cell phone I know nothing about.
Oh man,
I get ding a few times.
That's my problem. I'm a creature of habit, man. I hate changing things up. Like I don't want anything new. Just leave the stuff I have.
Oh God. So I'll try to. I don't know how to. I'll try to turn the volume down here. Give me one sec, guys. I apologize. I turned the volume down on my cell phone.
See, even spiritual people are well integrated into technology. This isn't sitting in your backyard in a yurt.
That's right.
Wade lives a regular life with regular tech.
Very regular. So what was I saying? I was talking about.
We're talking about proof. Is that what we're talking about?
Maybe proof. Maybe I'll get into this whole notion of proof, and people often disregard spiritual experience because you can't prove it. You can prove it, and when I was doing my graduate studies, I had to get into this whole realm. When you start to bring spiritual knowledge and spirituality into graduate level or even PhD, it becomes a real battle academically because there's not a lot of proofs for it, right? And so I had to do a lot of research around how do I get around this. So one simple way is there's different kinds of knowledge or different forms of knowledge. So very simplistically speaking, there's kind of three general forms. There's probably many more than that, but you have empirical knowledge, you have rational knowledge, you have contemplative knowledge. Okay, so they're all three forms of knowledge, and they're all seen and understood through their own methods or means. So empirical knowledge is apprehended through our physical senses or their extensions. Okay, so we all know what empirical knowledge is. We can do scientific experiments. We can dig up dirt and see what chemical properties are in it, organic properties and whatnot. And then there's rational knowledge. So rational knowledge is really the knowledge of the mind. So the knowledge of mathematics, philosophy, theorems, square roots, these sorts of things. You tell someone who can only see only see empirical knowledge or understand empirical knowledge that a square root exists. Well, they probably won't believe you, right? So you have to have a certain level of functioning rationally to be able to comprehend that and also to understand that. And there's something called contemplative knowledge, which we see through direct experience. Through direct experience, in the doorway of direct experience, we can engage in contemplative knowledge, okay, or experiential knowledge. Now, the thing is, with these three forms of knowledge, you have to use the right techniques or methods or perception to view them. So I can't necessarily view contemplative knowledge with the eye of empirical knowledge or with the eye of rational knowledge, because it doesn't correlate, because you're trying to understand it with the wrong mechanism. So with all three forms of knowledge have is a scientific method behind them. So essentially, the scientific method is, if I give you a certain methodology or certain types of steps to follow an experiment, you can follow those steps, they're repeatable, there'll be an outcome. And that outcome now we can start to see is if the steps were correct and the methodology was soundproof, the outcome is something to be said there. And if enough people do these experiments and have the same outcome, then we start to develop theories around those, or we start to validate that knowledge is there's something here. So you can do that on the empirical level, you can do it on the rational level, and you can do it on the contemplative or experiential level. So mystics have been doing this for thousands of years. If you do these steps, this type of experience will happen. And if you have that experience, now we can take you to a group of experts to say, is that real knowledge or not real knowledge, or do you have a real experience or not real experience? Because they've had those experiences, or experts in that field. If you take that to a scientist, well, they're just measuring maybe your brain waves that are happening through a deep meditative state or through a deep union with God. They're not having that experience, or they can't measure that experience. They can't measure the brain waves, which is kind of the outer aspect of an inner experience. Now, does that mean God doesn't exist? No, it just means they can't measure God with their empirical instruments. That's all that means. And say rationally, you can't prove God. It's impossible. God exists beyond the mind. So whenever you get to any point with the mind, when you hit a paradox, this is the limits of the mind. When you hit a paradox. So one paradox would be the universe is infinite. The universe is infinite. Like, okay, well, that kind of makes sense to a 4-year-old, but then you start to think about that. Well, if it's infinite, what's holding that? And what's holding that? And where is that at? So how does that even make sense? So rationally, that blows up. So you've hit a paradox there. So whenever you hit paradox with rational knowledge, you've hit the limits of rational knowledge, which is really pushing you to move into experiential knowledge, or the knowledge of direct experience. So the comprehension of understanding of an infinite universe, you can't understand empirically, we can't understand rationally, but you can understand experientially through direct experience. And that's you could say a spiritual revelation. I mean, I don't even like using the word spiritual, just knowledge on a deeper level that transcends the mind, because the mind can't hold that understanding. It's beyond what the mind can hold. So if you have that experience, when you're in that experience, you totally comprehend it. But when you come back to your mind in your everyday life, it could be a split second later. It's just more of the residual or the knowingness of that experience that is left behind, rather than the full experience, because the mind can't hold that. So what's important to know with this is it's no point getting into battles. Each form of knowledge is valid in and of itself. What we need is people working together, because there's so much potential on the spiritual side that hasn't been tapped, because people are really getting into fights. I remember in my undergrad, going to a debate on does God exist or something with a religious studies professor and a philosopher. And it was university, right? So everyone you're in your kind of intellectual freedom, you're in your mind. Rationally, you can't prove God. So this religious guy is crazy because he's trying to prove God rationally. And everyone like in university in their undergrad are rational beasts, right? They are always thinking rationally. There's very intelligent people come to university, generally speaking. So you can't prove God rationally. So I felt bad for the religious guy because he almost got laughed off the stage in this big crowd of university students because he was taking a rational approach to God with a philosopher. Can't win that battle.
For
Not
sure.
possible. You know
For
what I
sure.
mean? We don't understand that. There's great rational writings on God, which are very powerful, but they're ideas like food candy in a sense, right? Or mind candy, sorry, mind candy for the mind. Um, so it's really important to know where you're coming from, and not to have these internal battles with knowledge. Appreciate each for what it is, and work together moving forward and reaching our potential is what I believe.
Do you think the, it's funny now that you said that because I had no idea again that was, there were three levels of understanding that. But do you think that's why, I don't want to pick on religious people,
Mhm.
but the conversations that I've had, Wade, about shamanism
Mhm.
or about spirituality or about different dimensions of consciousness, I've been met with the most resistance from a spiritual person. Do you think they have resistance to that because they're not considering it from what you just said, or because they're precious to their own sort of dogmatic decisions to believe in whatever they've chose to believe in? And I think it's irritated me to have these. I try not to get in fights about it anymore, but it's so difficult for me when my experience is this, and I've said to I don't know how many people, this has been my experience, and then they'll say back, well, that's not your experience, or that's not correct, or that's not this, or that's not that. Do you think those are sort of dogmatic reasons they're sticking to this, or it has to do with the three levels of understanding something rationally that you were just saying?
Yeah, it's more about, I think, belief, right? You're told to believe something. I'm sure at one point you doubt it, or some people are just good believers. They do what they're told. I was kind of the opposite. I was very independent, always an independent thinker, and always question everything. And still to this day, I don't believe anything unless I've experienced it. To be honest with you, do I believe in God? Yes, because I've experienced God.
Mm-hmm.
Do I believe in deceased souls? Yes, because I've experienced them. Do I believe in, people often say, do you believe in demons? Well, I've never experienced a demon, so I don't know. They're in the Bible. Do they exist? I don't know. I've never experienced one. I don't really want to experience one, but I can't lie about it and fake it and just say they exist because someone wrote about them. I don't know. From my experience, have I experienced negative things? Yes, I have experienced very negative things. I've experienced things that you'd think were demons that weren't, when you pull back the layers and look and see what it actually is. Um, so I think people that are dogmatic or caught in believe their beliefs are just they've stopped learning, they stopped looking, or they're caught in a cultural or religious system which doesn't allow them to question,
Mm-hmm.
which is really unfortunate, because really it comes down to, as humans, we need to have a free spirit, and we need to learn from our direct experience, and everything's attainable. And I guess why I've been lucky about not having something forced down my throat, or is because I've been able to just look and be an explorer of life and ask the big questions and look for the answer. Not, and if it doesn't make sense, then I move on. And you got to understand, you got to give yourself, what's the word, flexibility and patience with yourself, because you're always growing and evolving. So your mind is always growing and evolving. Your spiritual levels are always growing and evolving. So what you believe, when you're 15 versus 25 may be different, because you've evolved and you matured in 35 and 95, right?
Mm-hmm.
And way down the spectrum. So you're always growing and evolving. So, and it's funny, people are really stuck in their dogmas. I think it keeps them safe. But if you peel back a layer and you say, well, did you have it? That's true for sure. Well, it's in the Bible. Well, so it's in the,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean it's true? Some people say, well, it's the word of God. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I'd rather communicate with God directly myself and figure this out, rather than, taking a risk here. You know what I mean? And we're all human, and we all have that ability to have these experiences, and maybe we're being lazy if we don't want to work hard spiritually. We're told something, we just follow, what
Mm-hmm.
we're told. And I think there's a real great danger in that. And I think as humans, our nature is freedom, and our nature is to have these deep spiritual experiences. Anything that prevents that is problematic in my mind. And so it's tough, right?
Mm-hmm. I had. It's funny you say that because like have said, like I grew up in a Catholic, a practicing Catholic family, and my whole life I heard that same thing, that this book is the word of God. And from my earliest thoughts, I can remember thinking like, if this is the word of God, why wouldn't he have run an audit somewhere in between these last 2,000 years? Like why is it so antiquated? Like if and that was a thing that really, like you just nailed it when you said, like when you were just speaking about that it's, it's quite problematic if you're hanging everything you believe on someone saying that this is the word of God, or this is this, and you just said, well, why can't I speak to that? Why can't I speak to that directly? And from my own experience, my own inner peace entirely changed when those conversations that you have are between you and your spirits, your angels, your divine, whatever you want to call it. You're speaking to something and it's changing your life. And it's just such a different experience than I understand. I understand church insofar as the community that it provides you. You're a bunch of like-minded people who are coming together, trying to be decent, living life a certain way. But it was never providing me anyway with answers that I was looking for. One thing that's really precious to me, I got to say this bit of it, is I've been sober. This is my 10th year of sobriety. And I grew up in a house that was less focused on psychological work or really and truly rolling up your sleeves and fixing your shit. It was about, you got some problems, pray to God. God will fix it. And I totally agree with that. Like, the universe is compassionate. It wants you to be, it wants you to succeed. But, Hunter Thompson is my favorite author of all time. And he had this amazing quote that was, pray to your God, but row away from the rocks. And like, that's how I felt about all of these things. Was like, I felt like I was in this storm my whole life trying to figure it out. And like, in particular, when I wasn't sober, like I was living in this storm and just like, oh God, please take me out of this storm. But like, I had my hands off of the oars. I wasn't doing anything to fix the problem. I was just sitting there like, oh, please help this. And I really found that shamanism opened the door for me to really start working and fixing these problems within myself. Did you, when you came to shamanism, did you have any personal issues to fix, or were you just looking for more spiritual clarity or looking for a relationship with the divine? Like, did you come to it out of absolute necessity, or you came to it from a place of, I love this stuff and this is the best system I found so far?
Let's hold that thought, because I want to get back to one thing you talked about earlier. I think it's really important. This notion of praying to God, right?
Yep.
To get, I bet you every Montreal Canadian fan was praying to God after seeing everything finally with what minute left in the third period last night.
They sure were.
What's going to happen, right? And this notion of prayer, is it effective? I'm sure it is, right? And I'm not trying I'm looking at a bigger philosophical kind of issue here. I don't understand the nature of prayer that well, and I'm sure it's a wonderful thing to do and it's very powerful. But when you think about praying to receive something for your benefit, you know what I mean? Or to get me out of this situation. Oh, I screwed up 29 times here. I will never do it again, God. They sent me out this one last time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the reason we use prayer, well, when you're praying in that type of sense, you set up a certain understanding or a belief in what God is. You're seeing God as a third person, God as an entity, a great subject that's there, that's passing judgment and has the ability to whatever, create miracles and to exonerate you, whatever you've done wrong, right? That's a certain kind of level of relationship with God, that level. It's not very deep, I'd say. Mm-hmm. It's very standard. And I think that a lot of religion is based on that type of relationship, God in the sky or sitting in the clouds, these sorts of things, right? This great other, the father protector, and I think a lot of people want that because they want to be protected. They want to have someone looking over them. They want to have that divine being that's there, like a father figure, right? But from my experiences, that's not the way it is, and what you're going to experience is a deep inherent oneness of all things. God is all things. God is everything. God is all things arising. So when you start thinking about prayer, like for your benefit over someone else, like how does that work? If we're all equal, we're all one, why would a a merciful God or whatnot pick you over them? Or why would they pick you to win this war and not those people? Right? It's just because there's certain religions that are around the world, right? But ultimately, when you have a direct experience of God, you understand it's all one. All of it, all of it is spiritual. All of it is holy. All of it is divine. Every grain of sand, to every piece of dust, to every powerful spiritual experience, the good and the bad, it all comes from the source. Everything comes from God. Everything. Nothing that doesn't. We can use the word God or source or whatever you want to call it, oneness. It's just a word, but that's the source of existence. Everything comes from that. Everything is that. We're just having a personal experience right now of this reality as Matt and Wade. But the reality is, so when you start to think about this notion of you're given favor over someone else through your prayer, well, I don't understand that. It's a funny, for me, it's not a very whole or complete understanding of God or the universe when you start to get in those type of dialogues. So for me, I get informed by what's happening to me, and I try to just make a better choice next time, and I don't ask for any favors ever. How can I ask for a favor? When it's all oneness. My job is to live spiritually. My job is to treat my neighbor as myself. My job is to be a good person, to make the world a better place, and try to open myself up to spirituality, to open myself up to God, not to have favor given upon me over someone else. So I never really understood that type of, and maybe I'm kind of going off
No. This
path with that, and maybe I'm not even understanding that correctly. So my apologies if I don't get this. It's not my background.
well, and I'd like to say too, like one of my absolute best friends in the world is he's an army veteran, and James served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and so he and I grew up in the same church where I grew up, and it's amazing speaking to him about his interpretation of prayer, because in the last bunch of years he's come to what you and I are speaking about, like fixing himself, sort of a shamanic perspective. What is wrong with him? How does he get through it? But when you speak to him about his days of going to war, like the worst situation a human could possibly be in, I can't think of anything worse. James was a machine gunner for 2 tours. And to hear him say, like, as a child, like he says, like, as a child, when you're fighting in a war, he's like, he was a Christian. So he went to war as a Christian. And he said, when you start to grow up and you start to see these different perspectives and you start to hear yourself, or you start to remember these thoughts that you had at war that was like, God, please protect me. And for him to say, like, he's like, you have no idea how disenfranchising it is to understand what you were saying then. Like you're in the worst situation trying to hurt someone else because your government sent you over there to hurt other people. And all you have to combat these feelings inside of you is, please don't let it happen to me. And, he said, like, what, it's a crapshoot when you're there. Why wouldn't it happen to me? It's happening to them, but it's when James talks to me about that, like I have these sort of torn feelings about prayer the way that you're speaking about it, but like when he speaks to me about something like that, because I've never been in a situation that's that dire where, holy man, I couldn't imagine myself in that situation. I would just be sitting there like, please don't let this happen to me. And he still is having to take care of the job he's signed up to do, but he's still, haphazardly saying, dear you, please don't let this happen to me. Don't listen to them, just listen to me. And it's such a strange thing to be carrying with you. But it's even stranger now that, he's past that time in his life and he's a father and he understands how strange that is. But to hear the suffering that he went through because of that line of thinking it's a horrible thing. And none of those beliefs held water for him, especially in those moments. But to loop back to where we were, Wade, was when you came to shamanism, and was it out of necessity, or was it out of, because like I say, like mine My experience of fixing myself was out of necessity. It was sort of like you're gonna live or you're gonna die if you keep making these stupid decisions. My friend James, same thing. He was like, I can't do this. I am not going to live if I don't fix myself. Did you find shamanism and spirituality like that, or was it was the system that worked for you, and you said I could, I could hitch a horse to this wagon.
Yeah, I mean, for me, one other quick point, going
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
the whole theme of war, a great movie that explores the spirituality of war, for me anyway, was called The Thin Red Line. The Thin Red
Yes.
Line. Yeah, so I found that very, I mean, I've never been to war, and I pray to God I never, there you go, pray to God I never go to war.
Exactly.
So there I go. But, but it really explores those, what you're talking about there, from spiritual aspect of what a warrior faces, and what do you have to come to terms with. And beautiful film, I really enjoyed it. But I'll get on to your next question. So for me, no, I got involved in shamanism because I was told that I'm a shamanic healer. I was told that someone told me that, out of the blue. I didn't really believe them, to be honest with you. I didn't have any interest in it. I was very happy in my career. I was very happy maybe I wasn't happy in my career, but I was happy with my spirituality at the time. But it was because I wasn't happy in my career at that time that I started to think, well, maybe I'm meant to do something different. Because working in the corporate world, maybe there's something to credence to this whole aspect of shamanic healing. So I did a lot of research about it, and then I got involved with it. And then, but there was I did have deep healing to do as well, and I've received a lot of deep healing through shamanic work. And so for me, it's been more of a process of trying to understand, is it a good fit for me? Going in, totally with like going in, not wanting to do any of this work. I still have a hard time even identifying with being a shaman. I know we talk about me doing shamanic work, but I see spirituality as shamanism is a methodology. Shamanism helps to heal. I see myself as doing that work to help people, but I try to work on a bigger spiritual plane, if that makes any sense. But in terms of this shamanic work, yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of wading in slowly, and just for me, always getting proof. Like I'm not someone to run in and believe. Again, we're just talking about. I don't just believe. I got to have an experience to say that this is real or not real. I don't care what you tell me, or how smart you are, or what this book or that book says. Unless I have an experience that can prove it to me, I'm not going to believe it, or I'll always have some doubt there. And I think that's important with any spirituality. The Buddha talked about that. He said, don't believe me. Here, try this and see what happens for you. And I believe that in shamanism the same way is, hey, I'll share some methodologies with you. You don't have to believe this or not. It's more about what you experience. And then we can talk about that after. So through that process, I mean, I received a lot of healing through that, and which has been very, very helpful to help me move on in my path. And I always know that resource is there whenever I do need it to move forward. So yeah, so for me, it was a reluctant journey that I waded in slowly, that I took a step forward every time I had some proof or had something to show me that there was something here, whereas often people just jump in thinking, this is the best thing I ever read a book on it. I want to do this. I was the opposite. It's like, it seems a bit strange to me. I don't know if I would believe any of this, and it looks really weird. So it's really about step by step, proof by proof, until it was irrefutable for me, the power of the healing in it. And the lovely thing about this work is we're not saying you have to give up your religion. It's more about, you need healing. This is a profound system to help you with your healing. And we work with compassionate spirit helpers and spirit guides. And from a Christian perspective, the best way to think of that is angels. That would be a compassionate spirit guide. We just kind of label them, generally speaking. Yeah. So
Do you find that many I don't want to say religious. Do you find that many people that identify with a religion come to you for courses, or is it sort of the fringe thinkers of those groups that are sort of looking for something else, but even within your presence, they're still saying like, look, Wade, I would like to do this, but I still identify with Jesus is calling the shots, and then the rest of his archangels are behind him doing these sorts of things? Or is it mostly sort of like open seekers looking to sort of fill the gap?
it's a bit of everything, to be honest with you. You get the whole mixed mixed bag of everyone, to be honest with you. But always what I find is it's genuine people that are really authentically seeking, that are authentically looking for healing, that are like-minded, which is hard to find in this day and age, to find individuals that have a commonality in terms of spirituality. And it's not so much about belief, it's we have a commonality in our spiritual awakeness, our spiritual sense of what's right and what's wrong. And this doesn't matter what, if you're Christian or whatever, it doesn't make Muslim or Hindu or whatnot. It makes no difference. And it tends to be, and we attract people from all religions, to be honest with you. But we find it's like-minded people that are kind of the same stage in life, that are working on similar issues, that come together to heal and to grow and to learn. I mean, you get people on the other extremes of that as well too, but with this type of work, you get weeded out pretty quick. Either it's your cup of tea or it's it's not your cup of tea, right? And I mean, one big thing about shamanic work is I find a lot of people with a deep Christian background, there are things that are going to push you because of your beliefs, right? In terms of spirits, in terms of how the spirit realms are set up, and how we call it shamanic journeying, where you shift your consciousness to move into the spirit realms. We essentially can go in three directions. And this is how we journey. We can journey up, we can journey down consciously, we can journey horizontally consciously, and we can experience different types of worlds and experiences through those journeys. And anytime to Christians, you move your consciousness down, there's a connotation with hell. So that's a big trepidation, but we work around that, and we explain, well, we're not getting into that sort of stuff here, not to avoid it, but we get into kind of the nature of these things, and about the safety and how to kind of do this stuff in a safe way, expose a lot of myths, to be honest with you, around these sorts of things. And so it's powerful work, and it attracts all sorts of people. And but the big thing about this is you're going to have to, when you get involved in this work, you got to do work. It's not like you come here and that's it. You got to work. You got to work at it. You got to work at it. And if you work at it, you're going to get results. But it's different for everyone, and it's hard work ultimately.
Is there a personality type, or a sort of a person that you find shamanism works better for? Or do you find that it's just, when a person has an intention, if they come to do the work, they're eventually going to get it, and it's going to turn into something for them?
Just an openness, right? An openness and the willingness to change, and to commit to that change. And it's one thing to have an idea about change. It's one thing to really want to change and to do the hard work around it. Because whatever healing work we do is really a spiritual potential within you now. You now have to manifest that in your life. You have to make those changes in your everyday life. We could do a remarkable miracle healing with you. But if you go out and live your life, maybe you're drinking 2 bottles of whiskey every night and smoking 4 packs of cigs, right? And you still smoke four packs of cigs and 2 bottles of whiskeys after the remarkable healing, well, nothing's going to change.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What the healing does is it gives you power to make those changes. There's an opportunity there, but that opportunity wanes as your spiritual power diminishes. But the healing work builds your spiritual power, gives you a jolt, it heals things, it realigns things. It often makes you conscious of issues that you've been struggling with, brings them to a light where you can comprehend them or release them. And deep healing that can scar us as a child, being taken advantage of emotionally, sexually, psychologically as a child. As a child, we can't comprehend these things. And it's shocking how it will scar us and limit our ability to grow, and maybe stop our ability to love, or warp our ability to know how to love properly, push people away, creating all these issues within us. And we can do deep healing on a spiritual level, because these ultimately are spiritual issues or problems. So again, I mentioned earlier, shamanic work is working on the spiritual aspect. So you can go talk to your psychologist till the cows come home. If it's a spiritual issue at a spiritual level, it doesn't matter. It's not going to get solved,
Well, sorry, Wade, I want to comment on that, because that hits so home to me, because I spent so much time with a psychologist, and she was amazing. She changed my life. She changed the structure of my life. She changed the method to how I should live. She changed how I should be speaking. But I didn't realize the knots that were sort of tied in my soul until I started taking shamanic work seriously. And like exactly what you're saying, like you can learn a psychological method till you're blue in the face, and you can implement it, you can implement it, you can implement it, but there's still something missing. Like, and it, I am also so thankful for my path, because like I really feel that psychologically, I pursued that as hard and as ruthlessly as I could have. And when I saw that road to its end, this one started for me. Like I sort of didn't leave anything hanging there, but it was a real difficult conversation I had with my psychologist, because like when this started for me again, this started for me with ayahuasca, and I said to my psychologist, who specializes in addictions, I'm going to Peru and I'm going to do ayahuasca, and she said, no, you're not. And I was like, well, no, I have to. And she was looking out for my best interest. She said, like, you can't predict these outcomes. You shouldn't be messing around with this. You should be doing it like this. And I'm glad I listened to that voice in myself that said, like, you gotta keep going. But do you, Wade, because you're so familiar with psychology, because you're educated in psychology, is there room to mix these two things? Is there room to mix psychology and shamanism, or do you keep them apart from each other, and you just sort of pull philosophy from either to speak about it?
Right. Well, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't parade around being a psychologist or even say I am a psychologist. And a psychologist has got to be careful, because they have the APA they have to follow. They can't mix practices, so it's a tricky thing, right? And so I think you got to be very careful how probably got to keep these kind of practices separate in terms of your professional designations and these sorts of things. But what's important to know is psychology is a wonderful, remarkable thing. It's truly amazing. It really is. But it's tackling the issue on a certain level, right? And if that's where your issue is, it's going to help you overcome it. Same with me. People come to me and think spiritual healing will heal everything. A lot of people come to me thinking that I can heal anything. That's not the case. You may have to go see your chiropractor, or maybe you should go see your doctor. I can't help you with that. That's a physical issue. Maybe there's an underlying spiritual root to it that we can do some healing on that can help alleviate that. And same psychologically, like I really often push people, if it's a really deep rooted problem, I after a powerful session, I often say maybe you should think about seeing a psychologist to support you in this. It's kind of this integrated approach or integral approach that we want to take, where you have supports on all levels: physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, and not assuming one person can take care of all those needs. They can't, and it's important when you're looking for your own healing, is to get the help where you need it. And it's hard to know that. That's the problem. I would say in terms of psychology, usually what happens is you hit a wall. You keep working on this issue and it doesn't go anywhere, and you keep working. You can't break down that wall. Usually that's a sign that's a spiritual issue, to be honest with you. And you should see someone who works on spiritual issues. So obviously shamanic work will help you. And there's probably other means that could potentially help you, but shamanic work is cutting right at the core of that. To really tackle that. So that's one sign for sure. But the same with me is like when someone, you should go see a psychologist to support you in this now, because you've unpacked a lot of things that are out of my realm of expertise. Spiritually you're looking good. Maybe psychologically is shooking you up right now. You need supports there to get you through this, and so you need to rely on many means to support you.
Well, and it's funny you say that about you can only pursue you can pursue a psychological method to fix yourself only so far, and you hit a wall. And to loop back to my friend James I was talking about earlier, who served those 2 tours in the Army, like he is as diligent a person as I've ever known to go to a psychologist. He's constantly working with his psychologist, trying to figure these things out. And he and I had a conversation not long ago where he said, Matt, I'm past the, I don't want to say he's past the atrocities of war, but he said, like, I'm past that psychologically. I've reconciled it. I've reconciled that was my job, but it was other things in his life that were still there, that were bothering him, like what you're saying about spirituality. Like he's just coming to it now, that the psychological part of his life he's got a handle on it, but there were other things that were just like he had them all twisted up inside. You know, a psychologist is the same sort of experience I had, I suppose, is that a psychologist can only take you so far. They're only engaging with you so much to draw these things out. Where it was, I suppose, it never ceases to amaze me on how spiritual a human is. Like if someone had told me this 10 years ago when I started my run with a psychologist, I'd have been like, "Shut up!" Like a psychologist will fix me. I will be fine. It never ceases to amaze me the link the link between just spirituality and psychology, and they psychologically, I suppose it was difficult for me because you don't often speak about the spiritual side of things when you're talking with your psychologist. At least I didn't, and to come to these truths later on in life, it really changed how I think, how I feel, what's going on with me. Do you often see people that have the same sort of journey as I did? Like, do you find people that are like a long ways down this path of like, they lived like Neanderthals and they had to change, and then it eventually led them to spirituality? Or are they people that sort of were exclusively looking for spirituality, sort of the way that I was looking for a psychologist in the beginning?
Getting a bit of everyone. Like some people have no spirituality; they've just been struggling with an issue for so long, or an addiction, or their pain is over. They've been carrying for so long they can't take it anymore. Usually, it's someone they need to change. They've hit a wall, and they've tried many things, and they got a problem that's plaguing them, and it doesn't feel good. And that's what one of the signs of pain is. We got to change something. Something we're doing wrong, or we have something we have to heal, because we feel awful, right? And we need to do something about that. And so I've seen all sorts of people, like all walks of life, all males, females, rich, poor, educated, uneducated, um, most highly revered people to the addicts on the street, kind of people. And they're all just people struggling, And I see the sameness in each of them. We all have problems, and we're all struggling. And the thing about shamanism, it's tricky because people come with high expectations, and with this work, I can't dictate what's going to happen when I do shamanic work, right? We spend time kind of talking about your issue. We spend time trying to put into light about what you want to work on, maybe setting an healing intention for that day. But the reality is, when I work with compassionate spirit helpers or spirit guides, they're the ones really in control. They're the ones guiding the process. So they're the ones kind of pushing me in which direction the healing work's going to go. And it can be often a very different place than we were anticipating. Or very often, as humans, we are very aware of the symptoms, not the actual cause of our problems. So the symptoms manifest on many levels, maybe physically or psychologically or emotionally or even spiritually. But they could all have a spiritual root, and we want that problem gone. Maybe it's a physical ailment, but it has a spiritual root or cause. So where the healing can go, we never know, to be honest with you. And it happens at a different pace for everyone in every session that I do. And it's important to have patience, because I can't say, hey, you're going to be fixed today. It may take 5 years, or it may take one session. I don't know. Every issue's different. Every problem's different. And what you receive unfolds in its own time course as well. Sometimes people have immediate impact with the healing. Sometimes the impact comes a week later, a month later, 3 years later. The gravity of that healing takes effect. And it's a tricky thing, right? So it's really patience and a willingness to change and a willingness to stay to the course. If that makes any sense.
Is it difficult for you? What you just said reminded me, one of my best friends. She was a nurse at the Heart Institute in Edmonton for years, and all she did was transplant hearts and lungs. That's all she did all week long. And she had such a strange job because her Tuesday afternoon was the biggest moment of someone's life they're ever going to have. Someone was coming in saying like, I'm getting a new heart today. And she'd say like, yeah. And someone got a new heart yesterday, and someone will get a new heart tomorrow. Is it difficult for you to, I don't even know the word. I was going to say like to remove yourself from their outcome. Is it a difficult thing for you to say, Or are you practiced up at it now to say like, look, we're going to do all we can to fix this problem, but we'll see where it goes. Like, do you still feel something inside of you that's pushing you to get a result for the person that they're looking for, or was that a hard thing for you to get past, or did you ever have that feeling?
Like I kind of let go of that. It's tough because I mean, when you work at something professionally, you got to have positive results usually to have people come back. So it's kind of like there's a whole model to like functioning as a business, right? But at the same time, there's an authenticity to spirituality and spiritual transformation, and it's to really give yourself over to that authenticity and to really let that take the lead. And so I've kind of let that go. Like my job when I see something is to be prepared, to be in the right state of consciousness, and to be open to the process of the work. And as a heart surgeon would be, they've got to become prepared. They got to have the skills, and they got to be ready to do the job. And that's all I can really do is I come prepared, and I'm ready to do the work, and I treat everyone equally, and no problems too big or too small. And it's just engaging that process and kind of seeing what happens. And like a heart surgeon, when it's done, everyone it's sewed up, and that's it. The results are good. You have a heart monitor on there or a blood pressure monitor, and you have a pretty good sense if it went well. For me, I don't know. For some people, it could open up a whole tumultuous awakening or a path of maybe they have to face the things that they've been repressing for so many years to start to bubble to the surface. And what I've realized is this trusting spirit in this process, and that they've come. We're dealing with a very ethical process, and we're working to help alleviate suffering and pain within them, and really to trust the process, and that's the key. And it's what I find is tough is people when they have powerful experiences, they crave those experiences. We talked about that before. They want to have the same experience the next time they see me. Okay, that was really good last time. We'll do that again. I don't know if we can do that again. I don't know if that's what you're meant to happen for you today. I don't know. I'm not in control of that. That's more to say about where you're at. Sometimes they're very subtle experiences, like nothing's even happened to them, but yet it's a power. I can experience it. I feel it's very powerful. And that's interesting too when you're doing this work, because I can feel the power of this session because I've done it for so long. And some people they go, "Wow, that was wow, that was so powerful. I felt it." Some people go, "I felt nothing." Well, I felt there was a lot happened there, but you can't convince them that they didn't experience it, and that's fine. And probably because they don't experience spiritually on that not level, but that way they don't take that type of power and notice it maybe kinesthetically. So they don't, or maybe they haven't done much practice in spiritual perception, so they're not experiencing anything on a spiritual level. I mean, it doesn't mean anything's not happening. It's just they're not open to it at this point. So yeah, so it's for me, I have to be patient. I have to let go of expectation. That's tough. Anything especially if you want to do good for others, you want to help people, and to let go of that expectation is tough, because I've always believed the harder you work and the harder you try, good results will happen. And with spiritual work, I found it's kind of, you do your best job, and then you leave it in the hands of spirit in a sense, and see how that unfolds. And it's also in the hands of the individual who's come for the healing. So it's a process, and it's beautiful work. I find it's incredibly beautiful, and I've witnessed so many remarkable transformations. But at the same time, it's sometimes people have to face their own personal demons, and it's tough, right? Because they don't want to face that, and it's not like I'm creating that. It's just that's what they need to kind of deal with right now. And maybe they have a negative experience of what I do because things got tougher after they saw me. And that's because they need to experience that. They need to face these issues that they've repressed, or you can't overcome them until you've actually looked into them and start to tackle them in a positive way. If that makes any sense.
100%. And this to sort of switch gears, you said something that reminded me of this, Wade. And someone asked me about this last week about Wade. What is there to stop a shaman from going around and not necessarily meddling in someone's life, but fixing problems that maybe they feel are appropriate? And the reason I say this is, like, I got the email from the foundation the same as everyone else when the election was happening and all this stuff with Trump was building, and the Shamanic Foundation was very appropriately said, like, look, you worry about you you don't worry about trying to fix these big problems in the world. There are ways to deal with these things, and they spoke about it. What is it? What is it that's stopping a person like yourself from say journeying shamanically to a world leader to try and fix something within them?
Well, I mean, I'm not God, or I don't know the right answer to all the problems, right? And you may think you do, but often you don't. And that's not what shamanism is about. So we have a really deep ethical root in what we do. Not everyone is ethical, and that's what you got to be really cautious about when you get into when you look for spiritual healing or a spiritual healer. Are they ethical? Are they grounded in strong ethics? And kind of one of the fundamental tenets is that we do not do any work on anyone without their permission. Doesn't matter how much I think they need help, or I know they need help, or if I just did this, it would help them. We don't do that. We don't meddle in other people's lives because they have to come to us with a willingness to work and an openness. So on a couple levels, so very because it's unethical, but also to work on someone without their permission, it's like trying to force a power through a teeny little crack that nothing can get through, right? And their door's not open. And so it's almost like, I think, a waste of your energy often to try to do that to begin with. But more importantly, it's unethical because we're trying to manipulate someone's life based on what we think is right for them. And ultimately, spirituality and ultimately shamanic work is really about transcending our ego. So we got to check our egos at the door when we do this work. So we tend to use the word sorcery as a term when people start to use spiritual abilities and power on others without their permission, or exercising what I think is right on someone or what I believe is right on someone without their knowledge or their consent. Because now I'm acting from a place of my ego. What I think is right now at this point in my life, through my 40 years of living or whatnot, or 70 years of living, I think this is right. But that's always changing and growing, you know? So we don't do that. We can educate people. We can offer our services in the full light of what we're doing, you know? But ultimately, I always use the analogy when I teach is that if you save someone every time they're going to get into a problem or a bad situation, your child, you saved them every time or pulled them away from danger every time, what's going to happen is they're not going to develop the life skills of how to protect themselves, or the wisdom of not, maybe touching the stove once and getting burned lightly rather than setting your hand on it, or setting something on it and burning the house down, right? But it's an approach of not rescuing and saving. They have to learn their lessons. And as parents, we all want our kids not to suffer. We really do. But if they don't suffer, they're going to learn no lessons. If they learn no lessons, they're going to really crash and burn at some time really bad if they have no life skills. So, and it gets back to this whole idea of, like, I don't think I'm bigger than anything. So who am I to decide what's right and what's wrong? Is there a bigger picture? I don't know, you know. And it really comes down to, I think we've talked about this before, our own footprint. I can affect life by my choices and actions, and how I treat others, and maybe my purchasing, how I purchase products. You know, that's how I affect. I'm one vote. My actions in this world are one vote. And you have to vote right with all your choices and all your actions that you do. That's what changes the world. You know, when we all take care of our own backyard, when we all take care of our choices, when we all start to make good consumer choices, when we all start to take care of the world around us and our neighbors, then it becomes a better place, right? And it's one step at a time. So it's challenging, but again, ethically speaking, we don't. From my teachings and from the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, who I work with, we never work on someone without their consent, and we're very clear about that.
Is it? I mean, that sounds very appropriate. Is it ever difficult to watch somebody screwing up on such a, when you can see someone screw up on a monumental level, when you can see a country upside down, when you can see people upside down, is it difficult for you to watch that on the news, on your phone, on whatever, and be like, oh my God, these people could use a bunch of help, but obviously it's not right now? Or are you pretty good at removing yourself from that, and, like, you know, in due time and in due course, they will find the help they need?
Well, I hope they'll find the help they'll need, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately too, and maybe using a sports analogy, right? Like
Mhm.
again, Stanley Cup Finals on right now. Well, so if you have more Tampa Bay fans than Montreal fans, and more of them are praying for Tampa Bay, are they going to win the Stanley Cup, or vice versa? Well, I don't know, and I think I don't think life's that simple. Like you know what I mean? Like I think it's there's a lot more factors and variables. There's an inherent type of system that's in place, and regardless of how much we want or we hope,
Mhm.
um, it's not going to change things. Same with this whole pandemic we've been through. I
Mhm.
mean, we had to develop vaccines, right, to get through this, and we developed them, and there's been a sharp change, in terms of things opening up again.
Mhm.
If we went to develop vaccines, what would have happened? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's really a process of just being mindful of what we're doing, I think, and this is complicated because now we're starting to getting to these paradoxes like we talked about earlier.
Mhm.
This is kind of, we're getting to the spiritual knowing and understanding that starts to transcend the mind, and we're getting into kind of dilemmas with what we can and can't do on big levels, right?
Mhm.
There's this whole idea, if a butterfly flaps its wings on one side of the world, it could affect you over here. Maybe not, I don't know, right?
Mhm.
um, Everything is interconnected, and but it's important to understand that our minds totally can't comprehend all of this. So I know I'm kind of not totally answering your question. I
No, no,
apologize.
no, no.
Yeah.
You are. That's sort of that's sort of what I was wondering was like it's. I think your answers are considerably more expansive than a regular person's because of not exclusively your shamanic perspective, but all of your how you're educated, what you were doing before. Like it's very easy, I think, for an average person to say things or to be irritated with, I will say Trump because he was such a shock to people's system, and people were they were so concerned with what sort of person they felt that he was while he was speaking. And I spoke to I found a lot of shamanic practitioners in general were like to their core offended with who he was personally. No one ever said to me like I'm gonna journey and try and fix this, but it was interesting to me that he in particular was such a trigger to so many people in the community, and I can understand why. Like, I mean, he doesn't, it's not like he stood for compassion and understanding, but it was an interesting thing because these tenets that you're speaking about right now are, you speak about them often, the foundation speaks about them often, Michael Harner speaks about them often in his books, but it's a totally different thing in practice. Like it's one thing for your shaman or your spiritual leader to say like, look, like down five, chill out, these aren't your concerns. But where the rubber meets the road and you're watching the news and some guy is banging his fist on the pulpit, it becomes a different experience for people. And I just, you completely answered where I was going with that. I wanted to hear what your understanding of that was, or why, again, it's easy to say we don't participate in those sorts of problems or those sorts of dilemmas because it's somebody else's, it's that's someone else's life. We don't meddle in it. It's sorcery, or it's incorrect, or it's wrong, or it's whatever. But it always interests me because it's, life is very easy when life is easy, but when you've got pressure on you and you have a certain skill that you think is going to carry people to another side, or it's going to help alleviate some pressure, it's very tempting to do it. And I mean, obviously it was like, the Shamanic Foundation sent that email to all of us that are basic practitioners saying like, look, these are not your concerns. You have concerns within your own life to focus on. And it's interesting to me, right? Like we learn these things. We understand that it's not maybe decent for us to participate in it, but again, where the rubber meets the road, or if it hurts your heart or if it hurts your soul to hear someone speak a certain way, you just naturally become drawn to say like, I could help, or I should help, or I should do this, or I should do that. And for all the strength and empowerment that shamanism has given me, like, I think I have those thoughts all the time. I meet somebody who I feel like, you said, it's your ego driving that machine, right? All that is a locomotive powered by your ego. I meet somebody that I feel is inappropriate, like you said, who am I? And I think like, wow, you could really use some God in your life. You know what I mean? And then my brain's just thinking like an evangelical, and then here I am back at square one again.
We always privilege our perspective, right? And that's the issue.
Oh, that's an excellent line, Wade. We do always privilege our perspective.
And that's the danger in that. Again, this is all tough stuff, right? Like, how is the world doing that well? I think it's doing better than it was. It's doing better than it used to do. I think we're always growing and evolving, and there's always going to be an ugly side to it and a beautiful side to it at the same time. But I think we're always evolving and growing. Is there dangers right now? Absolutely. Probably maybe worse than there was. We have big superpowers. What are they up to? And we went through the Cold War, what that was like. And now maybe things are shifting. But it's tricky. I think what we have to do is not do anything. We have to do something. I'm not saying be a pacifist. That's not what we're saying whatsoever, right? Get involved politically if you want to. Do whatever you need to do. We're just saying what the foundation is there's an ethical side to spirituality where we only work spiritually on someone with their consent. Now. And how does it's to think about that. So if we all go and pray together for a certain outcome, is that right? Well, if we all believe that outcome is right, yeah, we think that's the right thing. But is that ultimately right for the course of history? I don't know. Maybe we're wrong. What we think, maybe what we're praying for is the worst thing to come in terms of the course of history. We won't know. And it's tricky because because this can put you into a place of not knowing and being a pacifist, or getting into relativity where there is no right or wrong. And so what do I do? And then you're kind of lost in this kind of, abyss, So it's these are tough questions. But when we're talking about spiritually is we want to give someone, we don't want to impede on someone's free will and free choice. I'm not here to tell them how they should live their life. I will help them if they want my help, and I think that's important because people are always doing bad things to each other. And I think we need to take care of our own business first.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, you nailed it there, right? You don't want to impede on someone else's free will or free choice. And that's, I mean, I feel like that's a tenet of every single spiritual practice since the dawn of time, is that people have free will, they have free choice. You can't be smashing things down their throats. But again, those are hard things for me anyway. I think for every average meathead, like you just you have these things that have helped you. You've had these things that work for you. You've had these systems that are working amazingly, and you see someone struggle, and it's so difficult to not say, wake up, wake up. Like, this can work for you. This can work. And like you say, like people will come to it on their own. Like, you have to keep your own side of the street clean, and that's it. And that's all.
Yeah. And again, going back to the important point I mentioned earlier is if they're not open to it, your effect is minimal, if nothing. And where I see the biggest transformations is when someone comes to me open. There's a level of trust there. Maybe they haven't met me before, but I gain their trust through our session.
Yeah.
And they open and they trust what we're going to do. But there's that underlying, you can feel it, and they want to change and they want to do something about it. They're ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's when powerful healing happens, and they're wide open to this experience. When you're forcing yourself on someone, what happens is they shut down, they close up, they want to fight you, And so I think that when we force our spirituality, or even try to spiritually heal someone without their permission, it has a minimal effect. It really does, And so again, really just, if you want to help someone, be their friend, talk with them, support them, let them know that there's other opportunities, not to push something on them, because people will just step back when you push it on them. But these are tricky questions, and I'm still contemplating them and thinking about them, and my whole perspective's evolving on them as well. They're challenging.
Well, that gave me shivers, Wade. Having said that, Wade, what do you have coming up in the near future?
Well, I got to go build a buffalo fence. I got to get it out, which is really bad. Really bad. Yeah, so that I'll be doing in the short term, or fixing a fence or securing it a lot better. But again, I think I mentioned it last time. I have a workshop coming up June 24th, 25th, the Shamanic Journey, Pathway to Knowledge and Power. So it's our introductory online workshop, teaching you how to do the Shamanic Journey method, which enables you to shift your consciousness, to move into the spiritual realms with safety, and to understand what safety is, and to maybe meet some compassionate spirits potentially. Again, going as far as you want to go, and maybe teaching a few other important shamanic methods to help increase your power. That's really important with this work, your spiritual power.
Mm-hmm.
More power filled, we start to live a very meaningful life, a very balanced and harmonious life. And that's what people most often lack, is they're not power filled in the power of their soul, the power of their own spiritual power.
Mm-hmm.
That's often very lacking. So teach you practices around that. And just, it's a good chance to meet like-minded people as well.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, this workshop is short and sweet, like 12 to 4, Saturday, Sunday. Not too long on the Zoom. It can be a bit exhausting. And then come the fall, I'm hoping, I don't know yet, I have to get the green light from the Foundation for Shamanic Studies for in-person workshops, but I'm hoping to hopefully host in-person workshops again this fall.
Mm-hmm.
So check out my website, calgaryshaman.com, and just look at the workshops tab. You'll see everything I have coming up, in terms of online, in terms of in-person, and in terms of drum circles. So hopefully maybe the end of July, a drum circle, depending how my farm work goes. If not, sometime in August, we'll do a drum circle. And drum circles are great because you can know nothing about shamanism, and it's a good way to just do some spiritual practice. We get all faiths with our drum circles. It's just a great way to connect spiritually, just to open yourself up, to help do some healing work for others who've given us their consent to do healing work on them. So it's a really powerful experience, and a great community has developed over the years. So that's kind of what's coming up in the short term, and it all depends on our lockdown, which is, I guess, not lockdown anymore, but how things kind of roll out from here. And so life's slowly getting back to normal.
That's great. Yeah, if any of you listen to this haven't done any introduction to shamanism, or haven't participated in any of the Shamanic Foundation's courses, holy moly, do it. It will change your life, even if it's a thing you're not using every single day, or you're just sort of on the fringe interested in it. Like Wade was saying, try out a drum circle. It's amazing to, from my own experience anyway, it was amazing to experience the people in this community who are compassionate and understanding, and not devil worshiping weirdos just running around in a circle. That was honest to God, that was a big thing for me years ago when I met this community of people. I was like, going into that first course, I was like, here we go. And it was great. Like they're amazing people, and they're open-minded, and it's lovely. And so check out Wade's website, calgaryshaman.com. I think that's it. Is there anything else you want to add, Wade, for today?
Well, and I think the nice thing about doing shamanic work is something's happening. Right? Even if you're not having a spiritual experience, we're drumming, we're rattling, you're doing something, you're engaging in a process, and you're meeting interesting people. And I think that's what's important. It's because often we come with this expectation to have a certain type of experience, especially like meditation and these sorts of things. The nice thing about shamanic work is it's participatory, and you're doing stuff, and there's shifts happening often where you're not expecting them, and that's what's really important. And because we're stuck, stuck. We don't know how to move forward, and we have to do something to get unstuck. If we don't do anything, we're going to remain stuck, and that hole's going to get deeper and deeper. So just do something. It doesn't have to be shamanism. It could be yoga, it could be meditation, it could be prayer, it could be whatever. I think it's important just to exercise that spiritual muscle. It's really important. But I think if you need healing, the shamanic path is really important. We can really bring some powerful healing for you, I believe.
Action trumps inaction every single time.
Absolutely.
Well, awesome, Wade. That was another really good one. I really enjoyed that.
Awesome. It was great. It's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying working with you, Matt. It's been awesome. I'm looking forward to doing more.
Yeah, this has been great. So thank you to Wade. Thank you to everyone who's listening. Again, check out Wade on Facebook, Shaman Wade on Facebook. Check out Wade's website, calgaryshaman.com. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. Check out those courses that are coming up in July. Try out shamanism. If you haven't tried it out yet, give it a try. You won't be disappointed, I promise. Even if nothing happens, you're sitting with amazing people
Right.
who experiences are happening for them, and you can live vicariously through them. So anyway, thanks again, Wade. It was awesome. We'll we'll do this same time next week, I guess, and that'll be that. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Wade.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.